if we can see diversity as a politically neutral thing, to go back to what we'd originally were talking about.
Yeah, quite a tension.
I don't think there's any way in which diversity can be politically neutral.
How so?
I mean, we live in a state in which, which I wanted to get back to and ask you about, but like things like DEI is not at all politically neutral. I mean, all of these things are politically
Well,
charged.
if you conflate diversity with DEI, right? Because
but even beyond that, I think there's ways in which it's not.
I actually agree with that.
Welcome to Curious and Unqualified, a podcast about life in academia. I'm Eric Edlund, professor of physics.
I'm Jeremy Jimenez, professor in the Foundations and Social Advocacy Department.
And today, for our episode 5, I believe it is, we have two SUNY Cortland students. We have Jake, who is a adolescent education English major, and Santi, who is an adolescent education physics major. So welcome to both of you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
I want to start off just with the origin of this conversation. And I met Jake a few weeks ago at the Charlie Kirk vigil that was being held on campus, hosted by our local Turning Point organization. And Jake was across the street with a number of other protesters. And after the vigil concluded, I walked across the street and I was just interested in talking to folks from kind of a wide variety of perspectives. So, Jake, I want to just ask you, when you were there at the vigil, did you hear anything in particular in the messaging from the Turning Point group that you found, difficult or just objectionable?
I found everything they said objectionable. I tried to go into everything with a mindset of, this is the goal I know these people have. I know this is how they feel. But everything that they said is in complete opposition of themselves. While I was listening to their speech, most of what they were talking about was things like creating a culture of belonging, acceptance, condemning death and harm of others. But when you look at what this organization is and what it stands for, a lot of what that group does is try to perpetuate violence and the harm of others that do not abide by them. And I found almost everything that they said just really gross, because you know they don't mean it.
You didn't find the words they said at the vigil inappropriate, but the disconnect between what they were saying and what you believe the organization represents.
Going around and seeing all the conversations that happened at Turning Point or at the vigil itself, there were some people who were, yes, willing to have a conversation. And I at least like to give credit to those people that some of them did. Yeah, they had a proper, calm conversation. But at first, didn't mean to do that. Didn't mean to correct my knuckle. But at first, there were people videoing, recording, yelling, and especially midway through it. After we had talked, after the vigil itself, someone was screaming, and I went back down, and there was someone yelling about a lot of stuff, and it was very loud for a time.
One thing that I was surprised about was my perception. And granted, you and I were engaged in a pretty serious one-on-one conversation, so I wasn't completely aware of my surroundings in those moments. But kind of glancing around, I was impressed by what I thought was a rather, it seemed to be like a civil interaction, and I heard conversations going on all around me. So I guess I came away with a very different experience than you had. And I'm wondering, do you think I was like missing stuff that was happening around me, or did things change maybe after I left?
As soon as you left, it was just like a switch. I think we were there until 8:30 because more and more people came over. It was more, you know how college kids are. There's the entertainment of, you see a protest happening, you want to go engage, see what's going on, and that's around when more people were coming out for dinner and whatnot. People weren't really interested in the vigil. I'd say that affectionately. There were a good amount of people who attended, but I feel like objectively you could see that a lot of it was older people from the community. But more of a turnout appeared afterwards when it was, oh, there's people protesting, let's go see what's going on. And that is when the culture of why people were there shifted.
Okay. So, well, that's interesting to know. I'm curious, given all that has happened here, would you, not that I'm proposing this or think that I could make this happen, but I'm just curious, kind of from like an emotional perspective and an experiential perspective, would you be interested in having further conversations with the Turning Point group about things, or would you prefer just like not to engage with them?
I'd love to attend a meeting or two. I want it to be clear that I do want to understand where they're coming from, and I do want to see where our differences are. I believe in order to have an environment of inclusion that we need to be willing to make those uncomfortable decisions, and if they'd have me, I'd love to see what we don't agree on.
That would be very interesting, and I think that was one of the main messages from the speeches that I heard at the vigil, was talking about kind of a need, especially in these times, for more discussion, more openness. So I don't know. We'll see. Maybe eventually something like that could happen.
The privilege, I would love to see what I can do to better understand the other perspective.
And I think that's an important aspect of this, right? I think we live in a time where my belief, and this is just one person's interpretation of things, but my belief is that a large portion of our division comes kind of from a fundamental misunderstanding or not understanding of how other people experience things or think about things. So I think that seems like an important part of this.
And I also think powerful elites in this country are well served by less powerful people hating each other. And so I think there's also an issue where algorithms and news organizations, a lot of things go out of their way to sow divisions to kind of make those kind of common ground partnerships less likely.
Speaking of like algorithms and things trying to keep us hating each other, it is. I just want to elaborate and emphasize that I agree. It is the one thing that keeps us from doing better things for everyone as a whole, especially on a global scale. At least from my short experience that I've had, and I don't want to be like, oh, I know all this on everything, but it feels like that's the one thing. If we keep disagreeing on things, we'll never move forward with anything. We'll never come to an agreement on anything if we keep just hating each other, if we keep just being angry.
In the simplest way, they benefit from our dissent, and they want us to think that we're not able to have these healthy conversations with each other and to radicalize what we believe. And I think when we're also engaged in algorithms feeding us what we think, that it makes it harder to see past that materialized dissent.
So shifting a little bit to professors, do you think it's possible to be politically neutral? And is that a desirable goal, do you think, for professors to pursue, like in their instruction in class?
Okay, from what I've seen, especially in classes that I've had here, in high school, so on and so forth, and especially with the perspective from what I've been hearing about my sister back in my high school, generally it does depend on what you're teaching. Because you shouldn't force political ideology onto kids. You should just educate them, and usually that will lead them down whatever path they may go. It's not possible to completely stay politically neutral, especially in like a history class or an ethics class, so on and so forth. There's politics ingrained in that you do have to learn about sides and so on and so forth. But for other things, like maybe if you're not particularly focused on something that, like if we're going over like a singular equation in physics, I don't think we have to interject politics into that, like hardcore, let's say.
Eric would find a way, I'm sure.
Well, not that I would find a way, no. And I think I mostly agree with you. I'll say there is one exception to that in all of the courses that I've taught, which is one of our upper division elective classes called Energy and Sustainability, where we talk about kind of global issues, the environment for one, but also just getting more germane to the course is how we get and use energy. And those are intimately connected to aspects of policy and social consensus. So
that's true. And that's why I wanted to specify, like, if we're focused on one particular thing, you can remain neutral if you're still focused on one specific thing. But overall, if you're going to talk about energy, you kind of have to delve into that. If you're going to, or energy and how we get it, you're going to have to delve into it a little bit at the very least.
And I would say there's another aspect of this as well, which is in a broader context, is the politics around science funding. Right. And you people have widely varying opinions on the utility, the usefulness, the relevance of things like even the James Webb Space Telescope, right? NASA missions going to the moon, right? Some people would much rather see those tax dollars spent on social programs, for example, right? So even in that context, just doing science is political.
Thinking back to exactly how, like, oh, this might get defunded because this might have to go to a different program. This might have to go to a different program. Even though I love it and I want it to stay and I want it to have funding, but I also don't want to sacrifice other things specifically for, like, a telescope. The James Webb Telescope, that's already up there. We kind of got to do stuff with that. It's too far. We've done too much with it.
But thinking to the future, right? I mean, that was a project that was 20 years in the making, right? And cost, I don't know, well over $1 billion to do, right? So when you're looking at projects like that, we're not going to do anything about James Webb, and of course we're going to see it out to the end of its lifetime now that it's there. But in thinking about future projects that have yet to materialize, right, we have decisions to make about, do we want to go down that path and put our resources towards things that might have no utility towards or no benefit towards improving the standard of living for your average person.
And non-human species.
Well, and even not the environment too, right? There's all sorts of knock-on effects of these things.
The one thing that I say that I still think that we should fund things that seemingly are useless. A lot of the things we find out about a lot of different things and a lot of creations are just by mistake. We're doing something else and suddenly we have ibuprofen.
We got into a pretty big talk about this last night.
Yeah.
When it came to nuclear energy.
Right. Because,
politics are ingrained in everything.
Maybe just in a nutshell, tell me, I'm curious where both of you stand on nuclear energy.
And I'm just kind of really encouraged that 2 college students on their own are just having a casual chat about nuclear energy.
That's wonderful.
That's awesome.
I tend to invoke a lot of really deep conversations for fun.
I have been up way too late at night doing these things, not specifically with you.
That's really what college should be a major part of college is for, and it very much concerns me when it's not that for people, when they don't have the late night conversation.
I can't.
Personally, I'm against nuclear energy being pushed any further because I feel like the reason that New York State is endorsing it is reasons that I think go against the values that we're trying to work on. I know the support and why they want to do it, keep their funding, but I don't think that anything good is going to be done with furthering the studies of nuclear energy as far as global tensions go, and I believe we have so much going on that when we have more environmentally sound solutions that could be researched and that we've shown, hey, this works. We can do a lot with solar panels and whatnot, and it costs a hell of a lot less, and there's a lot less that goes into it. I personally am for that, and I believe in funding more things like education and social causes. So for me, I'm against it, but Santi, who is into physics and stuff, and that is his prospective career, is for it.
I am for it. This is true. I am for these things.
You've said a factual statement about my values.
You did. But I'm for it because I do agree. I do think that we should have... Do you know those images? I remember an artist that I got to see. It was really cool. Did like a biotechnical future, just a portrait of it. And it was like moss growing on buildings, but it's also kind of cybernetic. And that's always been my picture of kind of like the future.
Like cyberpunk kind of...
Cyberpunk, but it's so ingrained with nature that it kind of becomes one. It's really cool.
Like when the plants take over.
Yes. Yeah. Except that provides us an immense amount of energy.
Well, I think Jeremy, when he says plants take over, he's picturing the doomer future where civilization has collapsed. And
I am.
Buildings are just like large vertical farms for natural growth at this point.
Yeah.
Right?
Some of that was the image, if I want to be more specific. Some of that was the image, but the other half of it was this like actual cyberpunk city. It was really cool to see how this one person visualized it. And that's how I kind of visualize things. And I think nuclear energy is a step towards having a sustainable source of energy. Because fission and fusion are 2 separate things.
But don't you need fossil fuels for every process of basically every form of energy needs fossil fuels for its mining of the materials and the manufacturing and the disposal of waste. So like basically if you're using any form of industrialized energy, isn't it integrally tied in with fossil fuel use and the forever permanent fossil fuel use, which is a dwindling supply and which is damaging the environment?
I also say the same sometimes about some like solar power and stuff.
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely.
100%.
Double-edged sword.
It is a double-edged sword. And then especially the thing with solar panels and windmills.
Wind
Wind
turbines.
turbines. Turbines. Sorry. With those, they require a lot of space. Like a lot more space than you'd think to generate a sustainable amount of power. And it's the trick with that is trying to confine that to a smaller area or find ways to integrate it where people aren't going to riot or it's not going to be in the way of farming and other things like that. That's the big thing that I'm more so worried about. And it's just like, oh, it's not like we're running out of space, we have none left. It's more so, do we want to trade space that could be used for X
Right. The trade-offs involve the allocation of
for solar panels, or would we rather have a nuclear power plant, which yes comes with all of its downsides being it's more nuclear weapons. There's so many, but also it's a sustainable source once you get to it.
Well, my argument against both solar, wind, and nuclear, and really probably every source, maybe I'd be willing to give on geothermal, is you're familiar with Jevons paradox? So Jevons is basically, you think about when coal became more efficient, there was all this talk like, oh, well, we're going to use less coal because we're more efficient and able to burn it. But exactly the opposite happened. William Stanley Jevons argued what happens when a resource becomes cheaper, it gets consumed more. And so my concern with the development of any industrial technology is, as has been played out by history, making more energy available just simply gives license to consume more energy, and means that now everyone can have a second car. Now everyone can have a bigger home because whatever energy you add onto the MISC, all energy becomes cheaper because there's more supply of all energy. So that's my own take as why I'm the anti-civilization, opposed to any form of expansion of industrial energy. But we could quibble about which is worse for the environment, but just overall.
I think I've made it really clear to Santi. My ideal is no more technology. Just send me out to the woods.
All right.
I'm tired.
If we have time, we should definitely follow up on this. I would love to have that conversation. But
A lot of thoughts in common on this. My family is a bunch of doomers.
Oh, they are. Are they environmental doomers, or? A big, and like it's they've always been that way, or they turned over the course of your life, something happened?
As far as it goes, my older sibling in Virginia used to be a lot like Santi, and then just a lot of stuff proved to them that, wow, I don't think this is actually going to do any good. I'm going to study apothecarical things and how to live off the grid. I'm going to try and disconnect with this as much as possible because I don't like where society is going, and I want to get out of it. I don't think it's doing any good. And then my immediate partner has been a victim of just the world, and is at a point where they don't think they have any place where they feel content in what the world has built up. So they've resorted to that I want to be out of it mentality. I've just never felt at peace with the way things are, and ideally there's the part of me that wants to just run off into the woods with them, but there's the part of me that knows that I want to help other people find where they can feel they belong, or I'd be far more hardcore about it.
Interesting. So Santi, a while ago you were mentioning these images of a future that was really impressive, kind of a cyberpunk future. But I'm curious, since we're on the topic here, I mean, let's just go down this a little bit further here. There's kind of a sense of how you would like to live and what world you would like to see, but then there's also the sense of like what world do you think is probable or most probable and most likely to exist. What do you see from your vantage point, like looking 30, 40, 50 years down the road?
I think I'd have to look a little more than 30, 40, 50, if I'm being honest, if I want to see anything that's even remotely in the range of what I've seen. Oh, sorry. But from what I saw, and the ideas that grew in my mind, like a lot of plants at once, literally and figuratively. But that would be the ideal, having a very technology-based society that's completely green, where we're not using fossil fuels and we're just reusing all the things that we've already used, because we have landfills and landfills of stuff.
Okay, so this is your kind of your hope.
This is the hope. This is the ideal.
Like, so you're imagining a techno utopia. Mm-hmm. Okay, so what do you think that's where we're heading, or no? Okay.
As much as that's what I would really like, I want that so bad. But where we're heading is not so much there, but more so I'm seeing we're leaning into overconsumption of everything, and we're just going to have more houses, bigger houses. We're going to be able to afford a bunch of all this sort of stuff. But there's also the side that I'm also seeing in the news that we're replanting a lot of trees. We're repurposing things, taking down things, and having, like, the Amazon's regrowing a little bit more in certain areas. because of just random things that people do. And I see that there's a humanity on an individual scale, and people are making little changes that do add up to sort of the future that I kind of want to see. But we might end up leveling out at a certain area of like, we're only like 50 to 60% green, and then the rest is still there. But I feel like that percentage might increase. And it won't go to that techno future, the utopia that would be kind of really cool. But it gets somewhere like along the gist where it's just like, yeah, it's possible, but it'd be so consuming of all that everyone would kind of have to agree on one thing.
All right, so your expectation or your you see us kind of aiming towards some sort of middle road, some compromise on things. Yeah. Jake, where do you sit on this?
Oh boy.
Well, for one, have any of you read Anthem by Ayn Rand?
Oh yeah, what an awful book.
Oh, that book.
I mean, not even just the message, just the writing of it.
But that book made me so mad.
If the writer of that book is listening,
I don't.
Long gone.
The only thing I could really take away from that conversation was it reminded me of, oh man, in Anthem, there was like this alleged utopia, and when they finally escaped from it, they found all of these like overgrown cities covered in like this lush green that reclaimed, and the earth that kept its progress and kept growing and kept going after everyone had moved into these cities and conformed into one idea, into the we. And I don't think that's where we're going, but that conversation made me think, oh, if that starts moving in that direction, what if that ends up like that? I'm very clearly all for the individual. I hope that's obvious. In the next 30 to 40 years, I think we're going to see a vast cultural shift. In the past, I don't know, when the Reagan era, I'm sure you guys know, that really messed up a lot of steps towards progress. And we've just kind of been in a whoop, whoop, whoop.
Yeah, I think it depends who you ask on that. Some people would say there was a lot of progress there, and that set the foundation for the end of the Cold War, which was a monumental shift in world politics.
Oh, for sure. The shift that it had is undeniable, is the point. And that shift, we've kind of been in a game of intense tug of war politically within ourselves, and how do we move from that shift? And for a few years, it felt like we were starting to get to a place where DEI initiatives and stuff were becoming more neutral. We were agreeing, yeah, we should try and treat stuff a bit better. Environmental movements were going along better. There was more focuses on human rights and whatnot. People who were for change were being put on bigger pedestals in our schools and whatnot, and it felt like we were getting that representation for good. But I think we're going to go through a cultural shift in the next 30, 40 years, and we're going to go back into purity culture and more modest and conservatism, more individualism. And while I am for the individual, I don't think when we're as far into capitalism as we are that that's going to be effectively a good thing. I think the cultural shift is going to go back to silence, and we're going to see a lot more oppression. I think unless we make the shifts now and we start standing up and being a bit more vocal, we're inevitably going to fall down that pipeline.
And you mean just the United States or globally?
Globally. It's happening globally. We're seeing a lot of things that we thought, well, not we thought, but when we were in elementary school, we were being told, we don't do this anymore. We're seeing a lot of those things happen again.
Yeah.
And because our generation was raised with, well, that doesn't happen anymore.
Such as?
You got an example? 'Cause
Apartheid.
good point.
Genocides. Cultural purges. I was raised being told, well, you don't have to worry about being queer. No one cares anymore, but it's very clear that well, people never stopped caring. It's always been a topic, but people are getting a lot less quiet about how they care and in which ways. We're just seeing so many extremes in these things, and I focus a lot on the apartheid aspect because we're seeing in our schools that the achievement gap is beginning to get worse, and with more power being put back into states, states that have larger minority populations are taking advantage of this, and they're beginning to purge things like critical race theory, sex ed, health class, CTE, things that are helping these minority groups get out of the disadvantaged point they had are being taken away. And on top of that, the aspects of how much of a student body you're supposed to have in a school, the rules that they had enforcing that, I think back in '89 were taken out of place, and year by year we're watching more and more schools become segregated again. And because of this segregation, schools are having funding cuts. Because of the way the government is trying to back out of education, more and more of these schools that were reliant on federal funding in order to be able to help their kids get somewhere is being drawn back. And they haven't really been quiet about it. It's just that we are teaching our kids this doesn't happen anymore. And even though it's happening before their eyes, they don't think it's happening anymore because they're being told this isn't happening. And so it's really breeding grounds for this is just the way things are, and this apparently isn't this, so I'm okay with it.
And I remember before the show, you were briefly talking about, you were finding parallels between rural and urban education. And I think a lot of people would not see those parallels. So I wonder if you could just elaborate a little bit on those parallels.
So the new code word I'd like to suggest, because we all know urban is a code word for large minority populations in a school, mostly Black or Mexican, unfortunately, because those are the populations that we're concentrating into these poorly funded schools. Rural almost always means a larger population of white impoverished children. And I emphasize rural because we have suburban, and that's different. Rural areas tend to be more populated by tourists or short-term people living there, older families that don't want to put funding into school systems anymore. It's a more middle class, which, as we know, is shrinking. What counts as having financial means is different, and we're having to redefine that because it's a problem that we haven't really witnessed before. And when you look at these schools, because of this education shift, a lot of these kids aren't experiencing what it's like to be around a more diverse population, and they're being educated on these things but never seeing it, so it's becoming jokes to them. And in a lot of these areas, it's being pushed to them that cities and the minorities in cities are to blame, that DEI initiatives are to blame for their shortcomings. We're breeding this dissent specifically in schools. I have a really weird perspective into this. My elementary school was deeply impoverished, and we were out in the rural area. We had to go to the middle school where the kids who lived in town and their families had better means lived. My town had little to no access to jobs. There was a sawmill. There was the school, which was mostly people that were older folk who had retired from working at the other school district, but they figured they had the time, were going to go to this school, or they'd been there since the town was still in okay standings because the lumber mill was running at full capacity. A difference of 10 miles, and you could see some of the most extreme gaps in wealth and access to food, health resources, and just all those things that you think of when you think of an area that doesn't have the means to survive. There's currently a bad substance problem in that area. Stuff is getting a lot worse in that area, but we're watching as more small businesses and art studios come in and more people are failing to afford to live there. So a lot of families have moved out and into high-rises in town, and their kids are going through some pretty rough stuff because they don't have the means to survive in an expensive town. That is all to say, when I was in elementary school, I was specifically told by my teachers that we were disadvantaged, that we didn't have these things, and we were constantly compared to this other school and the means that they had, and told that we should not like them. And that was just at a smaller scale. There was only like 80 of us. When you imagine like these bigger schools with far different circumstances than my tiny realm, and I know these kids are telling each other this, oh, they don't like us, we're not going to get along with them because they don't like us. Like, kids are telling each other this. You go into a classroom, and I can almost promise you that they're being told in one school that, oh, they don't like you because we have this and this, and they're jealous. You go into one school, oh, we don't like them because we're not getting this because they get to have this. And kids are being taught you shouldn't trust each other from these different backgrounds because they have this and you don't have this. We're telling them, you don't have this, just deal with it.
I feel like a part of what you're describing is just kind of just inherently natural in how we organize, and schools, maybe especially high schools, are kind of tribal, especially with sports rivalries and things like this. And I guess I'm wondering, like, what exactly, and you were closer to your elementary education than I am, for sure. But part of what you're saying just doesn't sound that new to me. It sounds like the same old story that's always been there. But so is it the same old story, or is there something different?
Bingo, it's largely the same old story. We've been perpetuating for a long time that these differences matter and that we have to focus on these differences. We've had solutions to patching these differences. We're not pursuing those patches. And then you look at the larger scale, these communities are being brought up, and the things that in a rural area you're seeing it blamed on progress, you're seeing it blamed on, oh, you don't have this, so you should be mad at them for having this. And one of those larger things is we're telling people in rural and less financially capable areas that they need to vote on things that will give things back to smaller communities, things that take away from the minorities that are stealing their money. We're telling them things like that, and this is causing people in rural areas to be more red. They're now not able to afford their education and funding, and things that in larger schools with better funding are giving them the education on this stuff. And a lot of these schools are having to check between, do we want our kids to make it out of here, or do we want them to have a place where they have extracurriculars, they're able to just have a life and not have to struggle. Things that we see urban schools have to choose between, but it's in a different experience, in a different situation. But the joining fact is they don't have the extracurriculars, the things to keep them safe when they're out of school, keep them from just going and drinking and doing things that they shouldn't be doing that are hurting them in the long run.
It seems to be, yeah, this is a long-running tension in American politics, right? Since so many of our schools are funded by local property taxes, right? So this naturally sets up a division of resources. I think this tension is especially present for poorer communities, where your limited resources, you have to make very like wise decisions how to use your money, right? Like if you're going to raise the property taxes, a couple percent, like that's going to impact your standard of living at home, maybe significantly. And maybe the consequence of that is that your children or the community's children have, fewer programs to support them. But I don't know that it's a simple calculus to do, right? Because to have more money at home versus more money in the school.
I would say because it's part of the funding mechanism, because we do rely so heavily on local property taxes, and inevitably lets rich get richer, whereas so many other countries like Western Europe, for example, it's more centralized funding. Norway, being very centralized. The idea that communities that have less resources can pool from a central funding base, so that school is more egalitarian across the entire country, and you're not dependent on being from a wealthier area to have better schools.
Sorry to cut you off, but when you're in a rural area, you're in your smaller corner of the world where you really don't feel like it's just politics. How's that going to affect me? There's not as much education on these things, and there's not as much involvement. So in these areas, the people who do have the education and the means are typically not engaged with that area. They're, like I said, in rural areas, are usually living there as like a seasonal house or something, and they're voting that they don't want to put their property taxes towards that. And then the families that are putting their money in, they don't have that much to give as it is. It's already expensive to live in a lot of these areas.
Can you understand? So I think I'm hearing there's a lot of sense of hopelessness in a lot of these rural areas. Can you understand why some people would find Trump appealing? That's not to say that there's anything inherently appealing to Trump, but that you could understand in those circumstances why some people might be drawn to Trump for whatever reason, and what that reason might be.
Absolutely. I completely understand why. When you're hopeless and there's someone who's saying, I'm going to make it more affordable for you to live here, I'm going to make it so that you can afford food, gas, all of these things, and you feel like I'm not in an area where there's much that can make this happen. We're just stuck in this loop of what we have. It's appealing. You hear, oh, I'm going to put money back to small businesses. You're going to be able to improve your internal architecture and stuff. That's really appealing. It's just that there's not that much discussion on what's underlying in that. And it's a lot easier to think of the individual and how it helps the individual than the larger scheme when you're not involved in the larger scheme. I understand.
If I can interject here. Of course. On the overall topic, I've kind of seen most of it. My mom is a teacher in a much poorer school. I'm kind of middle of the road, and I know a bunch of teachers in a lot of higher schools. And what Jake is saying is basically correct, like just pretty much all around. But that primal where everyone's kind of at each other, especially in high school, because that's where I'm more focused in, or where I've seen more in. I've seen even poor high schools, for some reason, beef with even worse off or people who are at the same level as them. Same thing with richer high schools hating. They're all against each other. It's all that kind of primal thing. But the thing that I've noticed, which is really, really strange, is that in my specific high school, my grade and like my certain generation of like 3 grades, we were all pretty much the same. It was a majority of one type of people, regardless of what it was. And my sister, who's now freshly in high school, it's a completely different world. And it's also been happening at the school that my mom teaches at, which is a good few miles away and has a lower class. It's just so much more diverse.
Let me interject here and ask a question. When you talk about these changes, is this like a demographic change that you're pointing to, or is this a cultural change?
It's a demographic change that ends up evolving into a culture change as I like study like my sister's class and the classes around her. They have their own little subculture that my class didn't have. It's really cool to kind of like see. And I don't know, it's like watching an ant farm, watching them build all this stuff out. It's very cool to see these certain things. And I'm watching in other schools the same kind of thing happen. And as it gets more diverse, there's more different things, but they all kind of converge. And then when it doesn't happen and there's one majority group, it's kind of like only seeing one piece of it and kind of aching to see the rest. It's weird in a sort of way, because I can see exactly where you came from. And that was kind of how I, in the schools that I was around, grew up with, and that's how I saw like the other schools. I'm just like, oh, these guys hate us? What on earth? What? But seeing it now, like from a much wider perspective, like half the state. Damn, I've been around half the state. Anyway, seeing it, it's like, yeah, there's these little things, but there's more diversity going in. And I haven't looked into why, which I should. I've been too focused on the ants, but I really shouldn't call them ants. They're wonderful. Anyway.
Well, actually, one of our now retired colleagues, Lacey Kroll, wrote a whole book on this called Bitter Harvest, which is actually saying that there's only 3 species in the world that farm: ants, humans, and termites. And that once we moved from being foragers to farmers, our culture essentially became a lot more like ants, because we developed things which previously didn't exist in human societies and didn't exist in other species, things like a division of labor, stored food surplus, empire building, city building. And so just to say really quickly, comparing us to ants as modern humans is not such an inappropriate connection to make. So
kind of crazy. I would never have expected that at all. I didn't know termites farmed. I knew ants did, but I didn't know termites did. That's crazy.
That is really cool. I just wanted to add, it is great that we're seeing this diversity, and diversity can flourish, and we have all of the potential to make sure that this is something beautiful that can help us incite progress if we can see diversity as a politically neutral thing, to go back to what we'd originally were talking about.
Yeah, quite a tension.
I don't think there's any way in which diversity can be politically neutral.
How so?
I mean, we live in a state in which, which I wanted to get back to and ask you about, but like things like DEI is not at all politically neutral. I mean, all of these things are politically charged.
Well, if you conflate diversity with DEI, right? Because
but even beyond that, I think there's ways in which it's not.
I actually agree with that, because like I don't think diversity as a concept at the moment especially is inherently political, especially what's going on. And I don't know if I should say this. Okay. I don't know if I should say this in particular, but it's like predominant group wants more predominant group.
Yes.
And so if they're in charge and if they're running the politics, that's what it is.
I mean, in a sense, yeah, politics is kind of a zero net sum game, right? There's only so much power to go around, and you get to carve that up in different ways. And one person's gain in power is another person's loss in power.
So diversity, splitting that up, is inherently going to be political. If you're splitting up the power that you have or the power that other people have across different things, that's technically a political move.
It isn't to say that in some sense, or I'm not trying to say like that diversity in any sense is like morally wrong or anything like that. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying that diversity is not necessarily a thing that people are going to agree to. I mean, in the sense that I think from either side, right? If you want to advance a left-leaning agenda of healthcare for all, right, having a large diversity of views that are opposed to that is not helping their cause, right? And so, which isn't to say that you should be opposed to diversity of views, but I just don't see it as a thing that is in any way politically neutral. I think it's the opposite of politically neutral.
No, I agree. And I think it's something that we should aim to achieve when we're seeing it pop up and become so important. I was reading a statistic, and like Santi said, more and more we're having just more diverse groups become more obvious and more apparent, and part of the reason for that cultural shift that's trying to be achieved that I mentioned is because they don't want to endorse this. They think it's gone too far. But it's not that obscene to say that we want that diversity being a more politically neutral stance is something that we can't achieve. I mean, right now it seems really far away, and it is really far away, but diversity, equity, and inclusion is in everything that we do that isn't financial.
Let me throw out what is probably a controversial take on diversity. And there was an article that was published around, I don't know, 2006 or 7 or 8, somewhere in there, by I think it was a Harvard economist who studied diversity and the impacts of diversity. And this...
I thought you were going to say ants for some reason.
No ants. I've not studied ants, no.
Just get that out there. I thought you were going to say ants.
But one of the main findings of this study on diversity is that there are measurable negative consequences of diversity, that when people live in more diverse neighborhoods, they are more fearful. They interact with each other less. I mean, the author was really clear that this isn't to say that diversity is a bad thing. It might mean that there are growing pains that you need to go through to have like a rich, not like monetarily rich, but a thriving, diverse community. But that the process to getting there might involve many bumps on the road and many things that challenge people individually and make their lives more difficult in the short run. And so in this sense, diversity isn't obviously like a net benefit, even like to people's lives.
Well, I would say because we live in such an unequal society, it's hard to separate what that would look like when there's more equality among diverse groups, right? So like if you the counterfactual would be, what is it like when diverse groups basically more or less have the same standard of living, the same access to opportunities? That would be a better measure at the potential of diversity. But if you simply put diverse groups together while there's highly unequal situations, that's you can't use that to extrapolate to what it's like to just have diversity when there's not these historical divisions leading to some having more resources than others.
I don't know the details on the study. I think they probably controlled for socioeconomic status in here. But so there might be, like, you might have been comparing groups of people that more or less live together in a diverse community who are of a similar socioeconomic status. So I guess maybe I'm not interpreting what you're saying. I think you were saying that people who are like very wealthy living in a diverse community with people who are of a very different have a very different, like middle class or low class, might not mix well.
Right, but even if you controlled in that particular neighborhood, there's historical trends, which even if in that particular neighborhood there is equality, there's historical forces behind the scenes which could still impact, right? And so, so I'm just saying, I'm not saying that the study conclusions are necessarily practice bad methodology. I'm just saying, like, I don't think we can extrapolate from that the real value of diversity society until you actually have
I think this is one of the main points, is that this was a finding that was backed by statistics, but what the meaning of this is, how we should interpret this, and how we should use this to plan for our future is not at all determined by these results. I'll share this with you guys. It's a very interesting study. I'll have to dig around and find it.
You've mentioned this study before, by the way.
Maybe I have.
Twice? I don't remember in one of our longer conversations.
Well, speaking of diversity, let's pivot to, you are going to be hosting a diversity conference. So please tell us a little bit about what's the goal of the conference, and just kind of speak freely on it.
So this is one of those stances where I'm behind. This is one of the stances that really fueled me for DEI can be done neutrally. White guy speaking about DEI being a neutral thing is something that I'm not proud to do. It leaves a bad taste in my mouth, but
Expand upon that. I don't really know what you mean by that.
I feel like I'm in a place of privilege where I feel I'm speaking on other people's behalves when I say it. But it's something that I've come to understand that right now in this world, we have to host this conference as politically neutrally as we can. So in all of the emails that we've sent out, we've had to make sure that we're making it clear, even though we stand for this, we're not against anyone. And when you look at DEI, if you're doing it right, you want to include the people that are against you and are saying it's a bad thing, so you have to have that understanding that like I mentioned earlier, I'm trying to reach with Turning Point USA. If you truly care about DEI, that includes the people that don't want it. And at its best practice, it can be something that is done neutrally because it's just a practice of understanding what do people need based off of who they are and how can we take them at who they are. It can be a completely neutral thing, but we're not in a state of the world where it can be treated as that, because we're not in a state of the world where we believe we can just give people solutions to these things. And so a lot of what I'm trying to accomplish with this conference is get large group of people together to celebrate the joy of who they are and who they've become as an individual. Show research from things like we're covering a broad span of things. We have people talking about their experiences in the sciences, athletics, literature, psychology, geography. We're talking about an absurd amount of different things, and all of them tie back to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And the big goal is to have people leave this understanding that they have a voice that they can use to celebrate themselves as an individual. And when America is built on the pride of the individual and finding your voice and your success through the opportunities that you've worked so hard to get, and these people are working so hard to represent themselves, the goal is to give them a space where they can show this work that they've done. I feel like there's a bit of a bias in our country that is keeping DEI from being a neutral thing. A bias that is, if you're a minority, you truly haven't worked to gain your spot, that the work you've done isn't valid because you've been supported. But what is support if not networking and using what other people have done with their voices to help uplift ourselves and each other, to even uplift the person who used their voice in the first place? And with this conference, I'm only hosting it, and I didn't give a presentation because I wanted to clear the floor for as much speaking from the beautiful people around me, people of color, people of different abilities, to come forth and use this opportunity to represent all of the hard work they've put in.
To kind of add to that, my parents and the people I've grown up around, they pretty much, my dad came from, my mom is, I guess, first generation because she did graduate college, so I guess I'm second. Anyway, they came from being really impoverished and immigrants. Same with my grandmother and my dad. My dad was born here, but loosely, let's say. They've basically come from nothing, and DEI really just levels the playing field. It's an uphill battle. Until there was more DEI initiatives, my dad was struggling through every last step, and then he finally found something with that.
Can you elaborate on that? Like, what specifically, like, how did that manifest in his life?
He never said too specifically what it was, because I just remember these stories from when I was younger, and I just haven't gotten a chance to talk to him about these specific things, because there's other things questionably happening at the moment. Not very questionably. But it's like, from what I know, is that he grew up really poor, and he was pretty much that same really poor throughout most of his life. He worked since he was like 11 years old at a full-time job while going to high school, while also having to like protect his siblings from all the things that happened there. There are some kind of funny stories, I can't lie, from it that he had to go through, that I kind of have fond memories of him and his siblings telling me. But there's a lot of things that he had to do, and through that he eventually made it to college, paying for basically penny by penny, and eating falafels every day for 3 years. I can't imagine what that does to your brain at this point, but that's something that's always ingrained whenever I eat a falafel, by the way. Until he finally found some DEI initiative that I'd classify as DEI. I don't know if I should say it. I don't think he'd want me to, regardless.
You could always edit it out afterwards if you
I don't. It's not particularly important. He found that, and that gave him a gateway into a job in New York City. And that has paid him pretty well, enough to where he can afford a house, me, my 2 siblings, and dog. And dog again. So it's pretty nice. My mom has had the same kind of story where she struggled, her parents struggle still a little bit. And same kind of thing happened. DEI initiatives, now she's a teacher, so on and so forth.
So you guys have touched on a couple really interesting points here. One of them is the opposition to DEI, and I think Jake, you kind of mentioned that your interpretation of things, at least, is that it's viewed by people on the conservative side of things that DEI is kind of like a free handout, yes. Whereas you see it as more of kind of like building a social network to support people. And I think, Santi's story here about his family and how this has transformed their lives. I imagine that somebody who was more from the conservative side of things would look at this and say, maybe it was DEI, but wasn't the most important ingredient of this was the hard work that went in to get there?
My thing with that is, yes, there's a lot of hard work to get there, but no one is meant to be pushing that boulder up for so long only to get an even playing field. That hard work will still pay off in an even playing field. If someone's not going to put in the hard work, likely it's just going to fail regardless of if you give them that or not. And even if they do find a way to succeed, it should be that, yeah, sure, they found a way to succeed and they use the system. Everyone's going to use the system if they know how to do it right. And that requires work as well. So I'm not going to object to 1 or 2 people getting, let's say, a free handout because of an initiative, because it raises the playing field and makes it even for everyone.
Especially when so many people are born on third pace and they think they've hit a triple.
When you're born into a system that for years historically has been pushed to keep you down and you're expected to catch up, if you start a race a mile back and everyone is already that mile ahead, it's not... You have to be absolutely just insane in order to catch up with that. That's a whole mile you have to catch up with. You have to hope that their pace burns out or they don't want to do it anymore. And for a lot of our minority populations, they come from disadvantaged backgrounds that were systemically perpetuated. A lot of these people's grandparents have only just been even allowed to be in the same environment as white people. And some of them come over with money and they can kind of keep up, but even then a lot of those people end up losing that. There's schemes out against them. I couldn't think of any examples off the top of my head right now because I'm more of a reader. I like my philosophies and whatnot. I like my what ifs and how can we. That's just kind of the person I am. But you look at this stuff and you see it's there and it's happening. When you have to play the catch-up game, it's not easy to get all the way back up on your own. And all DEI suggests is, let's make it so that these people don't have to start all the way back there. Let's find the way that because they're doing all this hard work, if not more hard work than some of these other people, that we're able to represent their hard work equally among these people. And even then, it's not equality, it's equity. It's, we have these resources to help you get back up here. We're going to help you get back up here so that you can go at the same pace as these other people. It's not that they're working any less hard or that they're just being given a handout. It's that they're being given the resources to catch up, resources that have been deprived from them for a very long time.
So I think I have a tough question for you, and it's something I struggle with myself. So knowing that the world of modernity is fundamentally exploitive of the natural world and that it's numbering our days on this earth as a complex species, how do you navigate the tension between helping people have access to a higher standard of living within modernity when everyone's access of a standard of high standard of living within modernity is damaging to the natural world? So how do you kind of navigate that tension?
This is one of the ones that I struggle with. I usually keep this conversation to the mountains, as corny as was saying as that is. I keep that to the people that I go on my hikes with, the people that have seen the world. And so far, the only thing that we can really say after we talk is that we don't know. the big thing is that we need, unfortunately, not unfortunate, this is something I believe in, and I can't even lie. I don't agree with holding so much wealth, and I believe keeping all of that wealth is going to make more of a grab and more of a we need to generate resources. I think it's causing a lot more of the disparities among a lot of the things that we need to get people to catch up on. And when we hold all of that up there, we're hurting the environment and the people because they're trying to find new resources to make more money go into their hands and instead of just using what we have on the earth to make these things happen, it's not being given and it's not being put back in because you make more of a profit when you're not recycling this stuff. You make more of a profit when you perpetuate the bad things. So ultimately, I'm always on the easy answer of tax the rich, but the answer that I've been thinking of is I want it to be deeper than that. That's the easy answer, and it's unfortunate that we have to expend so many resources in order to catch everyone up, and my big focus is just on the schools. I think if we can help with the schools and we can make more equity just from the start of childhood, then we can give more people a running shot without having to put more money into later life, because if everyone can start running the same race, we don't have to catch them up years down the line when it costs more.
Yeah, and I think, well, the tax the rich is my big critique with modern economic development is it's basically a decision to not tax the rich because that's either deemed politically unpopular or not possible. So let's instead try to make everyone rich, a dream that can never be possible because the earth can never support 8 billion rich people, let alone. So, but so I think that's my fundamental critique of modern economic development is that in trying to make everyone rich, in trying to make everyone middle class, it's basically just leading to more exploitation of the world.
I personally don't believe anyone should be rich. I believe in hard work, but I believe when we look at how most of these people have gained their wealth, it's been through exploiting other people and the world. And it's
nepotism and connection.
Exactly. They haven't worked for it, and then they think other people need to work harder, and it's there are some people who have worked really hard for it. I'm proud of them, but...
Yeah, this is probably a point where I would pretty wildly disagree with you all. I think there is a lot of hard work that goes into this, which is to say that there's a lot of hard work that goes into, many things, and I think people... of all different types, like work hard.
Right, but the average CEO does not work 350 times harder than the janitor at that company when they're making 350 times the salary.
I bet Elon Musk works way more hours than the average janitor.
Do you think he works 350 times more hours than there?
I think that's an irrelevant statistic. In my opinion.
What are Elon Musk's certifications again?
I don't think you need to have that's like saying, like, what should your certification be to open up a small, a mom and pop operation, right, and be successful in life? Like, you don't need a certification. You just need to have ingenuity and know-how and perseverance.
The thing about him is that he's a nepo baby. One, he didn't do much of anything because.
You think he's not benefited from nepotism?
So he got a $20,000 loan from his father, and everyone who therefore receives $20,000 from their parents becomes billionaires? Like, what's the logic here?
No.
But most people don't have the capacity to receive any loans from their parents, let alone $20,000 loans. And if that's all we're talking about, I'm not sure that's all there is, but...
Less so just nepotism, but it's more so... I don't know how exactly, because I don't look into this man, because he's done some things. But... It's just, some of the things he's done are way too questionable for me to be like, how did you get here? Who let you do this? And why are you you are associated with Tesla for buying basically the name? Because that was what he did.
One thing that I will always vouch for in just trying to bring down some of the big gaps we have is just more transparency. It's one of the easiest solutions, but we know we're not going to like what we hear, and that's why we haven't vied for it more.
It's right. I worked in Norway, and it was really interesting. In Norway, they publish everyone's salary online for everyone to see. Like, you can't opt out of that system. So it's very transparent. Interesting that if you want to know how much your neighbor makes, just go online and you find out. I'm not saying there's no problems with that, but yeah.
Kendrick Lamar has a really good quote on this that I can never remember how it goes, but it's just in a song, and I'll look it up later because it's a really good song.
What's the gist of it, though?
Money where people can see it, where you're like honest about why you have it and how you've earned it, that's what you've done. But money where you're hiding it from other people and you're hiding how you've got it, it's basically clean work versus dirty work. And when you have this tension and people are questioning this and they don't know why, they're going to come up with all their theories and they're going to get upset that you have it and they don't. But if you're transparent about it, it's different. When you have all of this stuff and you're holding on to this stuff and you're secretive about this stuff, it incites distrust.
I have maybe one final question from my side on things here before we start wrapping up. In talking about DEI, one of the key words in DEI is equity. For conservative-minded people, that word equity is essentially connotes ideas of communism, and they much prefer the idea of equality. And you spoke briefly about this a few moments ago. Can you elaborate on that, like how you see the difference between equality and equity, and why equity in particular is a word that you keep coming back to?
I think what a lot of them are misunderstanding is that equality is everyone gets the same thing, and that's closer to communism than equity.
Well, if you're talking about equality of rights, that would not be true.
I think equality of rights is a good thing. It puts us all on the same basis of we're all human, we all deserve this. But I think equity of resources, when, like I said, if you've been systemically disadvantaged from these things and you can't access them and it's causing suffering in your life, you shouldn't have to continue to suffer. And I think when throughout your life you are comfortable, you don't need any help with this stuff, you feel comfortable in your life, okay, I'm happy for you. And if you feel you need these resources too, they're there for everyone. It doesn't just benefit the people at the bottom, they're there for everyone.
So roughly speaking, would you say like a positive vision of the future for you would be something like where there's healthcare for all and guaranteed income and other aspects of shared wealth that would support a more, I guess, equitable society?
I think so. I think when we do things like that, we create more jobs, and we can still, when we have a good bottom wage, that's great. When we can still scale by profession, that's great. I don't agree with communism. I almost always think that it's going to turn into just a lack of individuality, and it's going to end up with the deprivation of resources. And I think when we shift away from we're doing all of this to support the government and we're doing all of this to serve the people, it's a bit better. And I feel like communism is we are the government, and what I hope for is the government is the people. I think the government I think everything democracy wants to be is something beautiful, but I feel like we're too far along with capitalism and competitive gain of capital that we're not serving the people. We're just serving back into the pockets, and they're pushing policy to serve back into their pockets.
So you have criticisms of the far kind of like socialist end of the spectrum, ending in communism, and you're also very critical of the capitalist side of things. So your kind of ideal middle ground would be like an enlightened socialism with lots of personal freedoms, but also strong social networks, safety nets, things like this.
Like anarcho-syndicalist, I think is one of the words.
I've always just identified as a socialist, and that's always a hot take. I like when people are able to make their individual differences and we're able to see how our success moves us up a network. I like when we're able to network with other people and use our success to uplift others. I like when we have systems in place where I've gained all this and now I can disperse this. I don't like when it's all, I've gained this, I'm winning. I don't think anyone should just win. I think it should be, I like community.
Well, I think in education, we're all engaged in education at this table here, is an aspect of this, right? Like we all acquire deep knowledge over many years of study, and then we willingly share that back with the community of people that we work with, right? So I think there are aspects of that within the world of education, for sure.
And that's one of the things that I love about education, and education isn't really getting enough of a spotlight, and it's getting more and more dangerous for education right now if you're not supporting this capital lean, and it's disappointing because education is such a beautiful thing and can move us so far. It can help us make wiser choices about these political decisions. It can help us make better choices about it can help us make better choices about where we put our money. And we're purposefully taking money out of education, and it's not something that they're hiding. They're trying to find any reason that they can take money out of education. And when we're in the world of education and what we want to do is redisperse this information, it's, I think, something that it's scary. They're trying to take more money out of it because the best way that we can benefit each other in society is through education. Like I said, deeper understandings.
All right. Thank you, Jade, for sharing your perspective. I'm curious, is there anything we didn't ask you that you'd like to talk about? And or do you have any questions for us?
I guess my whole just closing thing is people deserve to just love and let live, and we're not letting people do that, and that's scary.
More love. Yeah, I think that's something we could all agree with for sure. We could all use some more love.
A little less hate, a little more love. Personally, not going to speak for anyone else here.
Sounds good. Well, thank you, Jake. Thank you, Santi. We appreciate your time. And thank you to our listeners. Feel free to drop a comment in the notes here and suggest a topic for a future show. Thank you all.
Peace.
See yas.